What do you like about reading?
I like discovering new authors because I think it's awesome spreading the reading love around. And Andrew, what do you love about reading?
I like reading books where I'm jealous of the idea, like the one we're doing this week, actually.
Interesting.
Dun dun dun. Everybody, this is the Goldilocks and the Three Cares podcast. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Crystal.
And what did we read this week, Crystal?
This week we read The Tower's Alchemist. It's book 1 in the Grey Tower trilogy by Alesha Escobar.
And Alesha reached out to us to request this review, didn't she?
Yes, she did. She requested we read this book, and when I read what it was about, I said, yes, please.
Yeah, this is a good one. Tell me a little bit about, what's this book about?
This book is about a spy named Isabella George, and we are in World War II Nazi invaded France, and she is sent on one last mission to take out a German warlock who is preparing some pretty nasty surprises for the Allied forces.
This is a pretty cool idea, isn't it?
It is. Yes.
We'll talk a little bit about, why we like this idea under the Just Right, but Isabella is an operative with SOE, which the Special Operations Executive, which during the Second World War dropped essentially armed civilians into occupied France and Poland to essentially train the resistance forces in sabotage and military command and control, and to provide troop intel to the Allied forces before they landed. These people were crazy.
A little bit.
And after the war, they all got folded into MI6 and became essentially James Bond. So to me, this is a really interesting and rich history to explore.
And when you add magic, it's
I don't like dusting of magic.
It pretty cool on its own.
Yeah, and I like that there's the element of the occult in this, because that's something that the Nazi Germany was obsessed with, was the different histories and occults. And I mean, we see this in Raiders of the Lost Ark and a lot of games and movies.
Hellboy too.
And Hellboy, and that's really interesting, and I'm very jealous.
All right, well, we should wait to talk about that a little bit. I know you are.
So
you can't see his face, folks, but it's
ear to ear. Tell me what was too hot with this book. What was there just a little bit too much of?
I found that some of the description was a little too repetitive for me.
What do you mean?
Let me set the scene for you.
Okay.
Now, I understand that in war, there are long periods of inactivity and boredom, and then short bursts of being absolutely terrified that you're going to have your face blown off.
Yeah, that's an expression that's been around since the First World War.
Right.
Second World War was no less true.
Right. So in this book, when we had the downtime, I felt that there was a lot of, let's bring out a bottle of wine, let's bring out a tray of food, I'm going to drink the wine while talking and eat this cheese while talking, and we know that in every situation, it's sort of the last bits of food that these people have, and that they're graciously sharing it with these spies and agents. And I wondered if there wasn't a better way to move the plot along and have dialogue while doing something a bit different, as opposed to a repetitive
at every stop. That's
right.
Something that you do. You mentioned the names. Tell me a little bit about what you were thinking about the names.
I found the names a little confusing because we're dealing with spies, which is cool and awesome.
And British love code names for spies.
They do. So, I accept the fact that we have spy names. However, I found it confusing because we would read the actual name of the character and then we would switch into the code name. But then later on, or the second half of the book, we then switch back to the character's original name, which I've now forgotten because we've only mentioned it once before. So it took a little bit of time to realize who was talking and who the characters were. I always knew who the main character was, which is key. But I found that a more consistent use of names would have been helpful.
And what did you find was too cold? What was there just not enough of?
The main thing that I found too cold was I felt like I was dropped in the middle of a story. And we are, because we're in the middle of World War II, and Isabella has been involved in many missions up until this point. This is the last mission she wants to take.
Yeah, and we have context for where the Second World War was in kind of 44, 45 era. We kind of understand, but we don't with the magic.
Right. So with the magic, we know that she's dropped out of the Grey Tower, but, you know, the very first chapter, the very first scene, we see a little bit of the magic that Isabella can do, and then we continue with the story without really an explanation of several different things. How does the magic work or the alchemy work? We get a little bit of that later on, but we never get an actual, okay, let's sit down and talk about how this works.
So how would you handle the origin of these powers?
Reading till the end, it did seem like we were leading into a second book where these origins may be explained. I could be completely wrong. Personally, I would have added a conversation in those down moments where she does meet up with characters who she has done missions with before, and I would have, you know, perhaps one of them is curious about alchemy and, you know, starts with, okay, so last time, you know, we were talking about air. Can you show me some symbols for water or whatever, the topic may be, just to really, connect and establish some ground rules for the alchemy and magic.
Yeah, and it is tricky to establish a rich backstory without necessarily falling into some of the cliches. I mean, you have flashbacks or dream sequences, which can be done, and, you know, you have introducing a fish out of water character, like the new member of the SOE who's here to, you know, join you on your last mission, but it's his first mission, so he has a lot of questions, so he's going to ask about it. And then there's just the time lapse, right? You know, you start in 1923 and you do a few scenes and then flash forward to 44, and now you've got a 21-year time lapse that you can work with. Those are tough to work with in most cases. Right.
And to argue that point, though, I feel like while sort of quote unquote they're overused, I found this situation interesting, and it was something I had to think about because it's not usual that you're dropped into the middle of something. So that was unique and different. But at the same time, I felt like we could have used perhaps a couple of chapters of back history leading into it. In most situations, or not situations, in most books that I've read where it's a problem, I feel like we start too early and that we have to, you know, we could cut away some of the first few chapters to get to the actual beginning of the story. Whereas in this case, I felt it was the opposite, where we could have used a few chapters and, again, something that's cliche, a prologue or something.
A training sequence.
A training montage at the beginning to sort of lead us in. And mind you, the first chapter was great and had a lot of action and I was really drawn in. But after that, I had a lot of questions that interrupted the flow of the story for me because I was like, well, wait, can we go back a little bit and can we answer this question? So that was a little too cold for me.
Speaking about the way things ended, we're going to give everybody a spoiler alert. For about the next minute, we're going to talk about a major plot point because we can't leave this one alone. So if you want to fast forward about a minute, we'll be back with you right then. In terms of the father, tell me about the cliche that we had with the dad.
Right. So towards the beginning of the book, we get into Isabella's mind, which is fantastic. And she mentions that her father had a mysterious death when she was very young, and she's very, you know, this has impacted her life. And immediately I said, her father is not dead.
Yeah.
Her father is alive.
No body, no grave.
There's some sort of mystery about this. It's going to be the main point that is going to lead into the next book. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And so for me, that is a cliche that I have seen many, many, many times. And personally, when I'm reading, I don't like to guess.
Yeah.
As to what happens. Some people might like that, but as soon as I see that, I know exactly what's going to happen because I've seen it so many times before.
the challenge with that cliche is it's not just a great plot point, it's also a way of heightening the tension in later books without introducing a character
Right.
now. So it to me, I have no problems with the cliche so long as it's well handled.
Yeah, and that being said, in this book, it was the best handled that I've seen or read in all the self-published books that I've read so far. So it wasn't that it was handled poorly. I just felt like the plot and everything was so good that to fall back on this cliche was a little, I wanted something different. I wanted to see something different.
So that's the end of the spoiler alert. That was about a minute and a half. We'll time that out for people on the description. What did you find was just right with this book? Because I have a list.
I know. You're like the most excited about this book.
I'm animated.
Well, like, first of all, we've been on a World War II kick as of late. And so this sort of fell into the right time, right place kind of situation.
Yeah, at the time of this recording, we just celebrated the 70th anniversary of the D-Day landings, and we're coming up to the 100th anniversary of the start of the First World War. So, you know, in terms of mind share in our society, it's never been a better time to write these kinds of compelling stories with a new twist.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Alesha did. I don't know if she took a look at, you know, the Nazi occult side and thought, you know, would it be cool to add alchemy and magic and fighting with magic, because there's a lot of things that we don't know about that time and what went on and who was fighting and that sort of thing. So I thought the idea was brilliant. I thought Isabella was a fascinating character, especially because she's a woman and she's she's actually fighting and defending herself and defending some dudes who can't, you know, they don't have the power of alchemy, so they can't fight against a warlock or other.
I have two thoughts about this. I love that she took the Nazi obsession with the occult and flipped it and essentially said, well, of course the Allies are going to want to fight on equal footing and they're going to have their own version of this. And the SOE, you know, as I was describing at the beginning, they were kind of the craziest, hardiest of the commandos, because they were supposed to drop behind enemy lines with really only we'll come get you when we can come get you.
Yeah.
We don't know when that's going to be. Secondly, extraordinarily strong female character.
Yeah. While dealing with the fact that she's just had enough.
Yeah.
And this is her last mission, and she's tired of doing what she's doing and seeing people die, and while also dealing with the emotions of the heart. And I thought it was a great sort of all emotional encompassing view of what it may have been like for someone in that situation. So
this was a well-written book in your mind?
Yes, hands down. Really well-written book.
And who do you recommend reads this book?
I'd recommend this for anyone who is a fan of World War II.
That's me.
Yeah, that's you.
Yep.
I don't know if anyone could tell by the way that you just
not at all
kept jumping in there.
No.
Anyone a fan of Nazis and the occult would really enjoy this book. Strong female characters. I'd say it's more new adult than young adult, or adult contemporary fiction. So any of that appeal to you, I'd suggest you pick up this book.
It's a long list, everybody. That was the Towers Alchemist, book 1 in the Grey Tower trilogy by Alesha Escobar. And Alesha, thank you very much for reaching out to us to request a review. And anyone else who would like to request a review, by all means, just email us at info@everythingstemporary.com. Crystal, where can we find us?
We are now on YouTube.
Yes, we have a YouTube channel.
We have a YouTube channel. That's so right. Everything's Temporary is the admin handle, so look us up.
Or Goldilocks and the 3 Cares podcast will also find us.
Exactly. We're also on Twitter at Everything's Temp and www.everythingstemporary.com.
And if you liked what you heard, by all means, share it with a friend, tweet it out, subscribe to iTunes, or send us an email with your thoughts or questions. Everybody, thank you very much for listening to the Goldilocks and the Three Cares podcast. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Crystal. Until next time, keep reading.
Could you tell I was excited for that one?
You kept phasing out on me there and thinking about your own points.
I don't think I heard a word you said. I was just like, World War II history.